Kindiki. Do we have a capacity as a country to handle this internal conflict? Because there has been a recurrent raids or conflict in this country. What are the plans now that our security agencies on the ground are experiencing shortage of resources to handle this conflict? Honorable Speaker, as at now, we have surveillance vehicles, we have KDF, we have a number of security agencies in Turkana South. But unfortunately, the response we are experiencing, this response can only happen during the daytime. The bandits have come up with a new strategy. And this strategy is only to raid at night when our security agents are sleeping. They cannot operate at night. Honorable Speaker, what is the take of our CS with regards to this matter? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Speaker.
Hold on. Thank you, Honorable Ariko. Avoid the temptation to make a speech in the guise of a question. Honorable Kangogo.
Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Mr. Kindiki. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Cabinet Secretary, the National Police, Mr. CS, they don't have the capacity to handle the bandits in Kerio Valley. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, peacemakers from West Pokot and my constituency, Mr. Speaker, recovered about 7 heads of cattle, and they were taken to a Chieshu camp in a place called Kamele, so that to be handed over to the owners the following day. Mr. Speaker, that night, a daring bandits entered into a Chieshu camp and took away all the animals. On Friday, Mr. Speaker, the same thing with the honorable member for Baringo North talked about. A bandit who was arrested and taken to county headquarters in Iten, where we have about 100 policemen. The county headquarters, Mr. Speaker. And then 10 bandits came all the way about 200 kilometers away to rescue their own, and they successfully took away from the police. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the CS to confirm to this House, Mr. Speaker, that the National Police Service are unable to handle the bandits, and bring a motion to this House so that we can have the Kenya military or the KDF to take over the operations of bandits in Kerio Valley.
The women rep Turkana, she's left. Yes,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you. I only have a very brief question to the CS. Right now, we're being told that the person who was booked in at Iten County Referral was a bandit. Was there any OB elsewhere booked that particular person had previously been identified as a bandit or not? And then we would wish to know, was he taken by the police, or if the other people who came to the county referral and took him, if people are calling them bandits, can they name them by their names? So what I wish to know is, was there an OB elsewhere that Dennis was booked as a bandit? And the other ones who came to the rescue, were they police, or if as bandits? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You. Last, the Honorable Farah Maalim.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Minister be ready to answer after Farah.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, be patient. If I'm satisfied there is enough interest, I'll give another round.
Mr. Speaker, this is, I must commend the government on this because this is the first time the military has been used for a peacekeeping in this country where there was not a genocide the way it was done in Wagala, in Wajir in 1984. And my biggest worry was that this was going to be heavy and it's going to be military is not for these kind of things. But the fact that you have protected the lives of the innocents and you're just looking for the actual bandits themselves deserves a lot of compliment. My question, Mr. Speaker, is, Mr. Minister, have you tried some soft power? Have you tried to find out how you can deal with the elders, with the communities, and bring the communities together, as opposed to maintaining basically law and order in that place? Have you also tried to look at the social issues that underpin, because there's only one community that everybody's complaining about, the Pokots. The Pokots are the poorest, they are the least educated, there's the least what they call infrastructure in order.
Order, Farah. Order. The member from Balambala, you are out of order. Can you conclude your question?
Mr. Speaker, we need to educate those children, Mr. Speaker. We have heard this before, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Minister, thank you very much. I've discussed some of these things with you, and I'm sure you're going to take them into consideration. But let's look at the social conditions in there, first of all. When you have a very poor social condition somewhere and everywhere around there has got some wealth, then of course they will go and try and go and attack those places. So my question is that let's look at soft power. It has worked in Northeastern Province, for your information. And also let's see how we can change the situation of the children of Pokot there. Thank you.
Who is raising a point of order? Moroto, what is your point of order? Because Pokots were mentioned?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I want to say thank you very much for giving me also this chance to say, when these people are talking, they are talking as if they are the holiest. When they are also killing. I lost about 5 people the other day and this morning in a Takwel.
Honorable
from
Moroto,
the other south.
I've given you a floor because you are challenging what Farah was saying. Now you are pursuing a totally different agenda. What was out of order that Farah was saying, that's the reason why I gave you the floor.
No, Mr. Speaker, I was just asking what I have in my mind. I was not following what Farah said. Oh. My question, I just want to, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to take time. I want to congratulate the CS, and I want to ask him to use the intelligence services. For these guys here speaking here, let them also be put in so that they can know how to control themselves down there on the ground. I come from Kapenguria. We used to have the problem between West Pokot and Trans Nzoia, but this time there's nothing there because we met and we sat like leaders and worked together. These guys now, they're now talking here and they cannot even go to ground and they invite us to come and tell them what to do. Mr. Minister, start with these people. The members, put them in.
Honorable Moroto, you are totally out of order. You are imputing improper motives on your colleagues. Minister. Minister, if you can give quick, short answers to those short questions. We still have 4 questions for you, and we have done very poorly. 45 minutes on this one.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'll do as guided on the first matter. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to say on the issue that was raised on a point of order about tabling statistics on recoveries of livestock. I didn't say I'm carrying the statistics. I said if the House directs, I can table them in the House even by
I heard
Tuesday.
you that way.
Yes,
You can,
Mr. Speaker, I can, if you direct,
yes.
I can table the statistics of recoveries from the time the operation began. In fact, we can even take it backwards a bit, 2 months before, and these 2 months when there have been an operation, and the recoveries and where and what is remaining. Mr. Speaker, also, I maybe inform the House through you that I am informed that the High Court in Chuka has ruled in favor of the Prosecution Council and in favor of the state to cancel the anticipatory bail on the suspected killers. Mr. Speaker, other than that, let me mention or respond to the other issues quickly. We are strengthening the independent police oversight authority to supplement the work of the Internal Affairs Unit of the National Police Service to provide an independent arm of the state that can help in dealing with extrajudicial killings. I confirm to the House, Mr. Speaker, and assure the House and the member for Manyata that all extrajudicial instances of extrajudicial killings are actively under investigation, and the policy of this administration is zero tolerance on extrajudicial killings. The police officers have been informed accordingly that we shall not protect any officer who misuses their firearm to kill people other than what the law provides on the use of lethal force in law enforcement. Honorable Speaker, with regard, and that includes the issue around the killing in Kianjokoma. Mr. Speaker, the second one, raised by the member for Baringo North, the Honorable Makilap, that yes, it's true, there was that incident, and I want to tie that to the other supplementary question raised by the member for Elgeyo Marakwet, the women rep, because they are related. There was an incident at Iten Hospital. The suspect involved, the person involved is a suspected bandit because he had bullet wounds and he could not explain where he was shot, and he just came to look for treatment. And we believe also that the people who came to rescue him were criminals because they came through the fence of the hospital, so they just came perhaps to rescue one of their own who was hurt and could not explain. The reason why that happened, notwithstanding the presence of a few police officers who were on site at that time, was the determination by the commanding officer on site that a shootout inside that facility would have caused fatalities on patients. And that gave a leeway for the rescue to succeed. I want to confirm to the House, through you, Mr. Speaker, that this person has been on police radar even before this attack. We are on him. We have some leads. We believe we shall arrest him as soon as possible. Honorable Speaker, the other issue was raised by the member for Turkana South on the capacity of our police agencies to maintain law and order. Honorable Speaker, I am persuaded that Kenya has enough police officers and enough wherewithal to handle all our challenges, including the challenges we are facing in northern Kenya. However, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that it is the position of this government that there is need to reform our national security organs to make sure that they respond better to our threats. That is why one of the first acts His Excellency the President undertook was to institute a presidential task force on reforming the National Police Service, which is an admission that there is need to reform around command, around efficiency, and around operational sophistication to make sure that the gaps that we continue to exist, to encounter in our law enforcement of our internal security are resolved. Very shortly, that task force will present its findings. The government has committed to implement all the recommendations without exception that will come from that task force, including changing the entire command of the National Police Service, the terms under which one becomes a commander of any level, tying command to success and results and deliverables, so that you don't become a county commander, a regional commander for life, and there are no results. People are still having insecurity in your area. Make it time-bound and tied to results. And even that reform, even as we wait for those recommendations, we are continually addressing command issues to ensure efficiency. Even this afternoon, I think the government and the National Police Service will be announcing changes in the top command of the National Police Service, starting with the appointment of the one. The House may want to know that in 2014, the government started a police equipment modernization program, which ran for 3-4 years, but stopped after that. It was to the tune of 10 billion shillings a year. It really helped to improve the security at that time. But due to the collapse of that funding program, we have had issues around our ability to make Kenya safer. And what this administration has done is to revive the police equipment modernization program. And for the next 3 years, the government of Kenya will spend 20 billion shillings to ensure that we modernize our equipment. I am happy to return here if the House requires so in 3 months, because by that time, in 3 months from now, I expect to have revived the police air wing, which is completely dead. I intend to have acquired at least 3 gunship helicopters for the National Police Service so that we stop depending on the military, because they also have a national duty to perform. I intend to acquire some unmanned armored vehicles, UAVs or drones, and going forward, increasingly, we are going to yield the benefits of technology-driven, intelligence-driven operations. I am happy to come back and report progress on this after a few months on the request of the House. I think, Honorable Speaker, that is it. Maybe if I've left anything, I'll be reminded, but...
Only one, Farah's soft power engaging...
Soft power, I agree. Honorable Speaker, I agree. Thank you for the reminder, sir. We believe that the long-term solution of this problem is not just the hardware. But we have made a policy decision that before we can engage on long-term solutions, including issues of economic empowerment and social amenities, we must silence the guns first. We must do whatever it takes to make it rare that there is an attack, there is there's gunfire everywhere. And after that, now we can sit down and ask ourselves, why is it that this problem is recurring all the time? The ministry has developed a master plan in conjunction with other stakeholders, including the military, for infrastructural development of northern Kenya, which will begin from December this year, rebuilding schools, providing amenities, and also engaging communities for peace building, and that will now come with both disarmament, forceful and voluntary. But first, before we engage in any of these programs, Mr. Speaker, we are persuaded that we must silence the guns. As soon as we acquire the equipment we are looking at as the National Police Service, there will be a lot of change. But even as we speak, we have made a lot of changes in evacuating the gorges, the valleys, and the hideouts. And the attacks that are happening now are attacking in the criminals who may have used the window we had given for evacuation of civilians so that we comply with international law. That allowed a few, in our view, to escape and mingle with populations, and they are the ones giving us problems, which we are resolving through NPR and through the technology that we are acquiring in the next few weeks or months. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable members, I know there's much more interest on this, but we have to move to the next question. Question 074 of 2023, Member for Gilgil, Mother Wangari.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question 74 of 2023 to the Cabinet Secretary of Interior and National Administration. Number one, could the Cabinet Secretary explain why there is a shortage of birth registration materials, also known as B1 forms, in health facilities across the country? Number two, could the Cabinet Secretary explain why mothers in public hospitals, especially those on the national government Linda Mama program, are subjected to unnecessary detention after discharge as a result of unregistered births of their babies due to the above-mentioned shortage, yet it is the duty of the government to provide the B1 forms? And finally, what steps has the ministry taken to ameliorate the situation and ensure that mothers who are due for discharge are not forced to incur any additional bills due to the unjust detention in hospitals owing to the government's incapacity to promptly register births as a result of the lack of birth registration forms? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think this is a soft question.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, we admit that we have challenges in the availability of Form B1s, and this is a problem that started last year around April 2022, and the challenge is arising from the capacity at the government press. The government press has not been modernized for a very long time. The equipment they have and the human resource capacity does not allow them to print enough security documents, including these forms, quick enough to meet the rising demand. Therefore, you will see in the response, the written response which I filed before this House, Mr. Speaker, I have attached 3 letters which we have written as a ministry to the government printer, requiring them to increase the speed at which they are supplying us with Form B1s. I can report to the House, Honorable Speaker, that the demand right now the supply is 50 books of 400 forms per week, but the demand is over 1,000 books of that size. So you can see we are supplying less than, almost a third, less than half of the requirement. What measures are we taking? Other than writing letters, we have changed the management of the government printer because we also would believe that part of the challenge is the innovation of the leadership at that unit to provide off-balance sheet, off-budget solutions to some of the capacity challenges we are having. And I can report comfortably, after changing the management of the government press in the last 2 months, the new government printer has tabled, and I have approved, an equipment modernization program which will not even involve government spending any money, because it's through a lease of equipment where over time we will pay whoever owns those machines, and after 10 years we hand over the machines to him. That is the solution that helped us with police vehicles when the police leasing, vehicle leasing program was initiated. So we believe very to provide us with a solution. Even as we wait for this equipment, we need to find a solution so that should the House require me to provide an update in the next few months, because the equipment program may take around 6 months because of the nature, the financing and the contractual arrangements, we will have an answer. Finally, Honorable Speaker, is that we have shortage of personnel. That's another challenge.
In government, and the personification of liturgy in government operations resides in the Ministry of Interior. And if you listened to the answers pertaining to the issues to do with bandits, and even now when I listen to the CS answer the question on slow printing of forms, I hear the CS telling us forms are slowly being printed by the government printer because of challenges of modernization in the government printer's office, challenges of employment, there are low staff levels in the department. When I also listen to the president who has hired the CS, the president is talking about digitization. So I really want to know from the CS, where do you sit as a cabinet secretary in terms of implementing that policy on the digitization of government services? Because you cannot be talking about low levels of staff while we are also complaining of a huge wage bill in the public service, when the president is telling us about digitization and the CS is telling us that he's modernizing printing. Shouldn't we then be getting this B1 form in a digital format? And I can see the PS Citizen Services is seated there. The PS Citizen Services have engaged with him on a unique identifier system that seeks to capture data of newborns digitally, electronically. But now the CS is telling us about modernizing the government printer, hiring another person at the government printer who will be more efficient, leasing equipment instead of buying new equipment. CS, you must tell us, where do you sit? Are you aligned to the president's agenda to digitize, or are you not? It is that simple. Cabinet Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was hoping that this would be a softer question because it has no guns, but I can see the guns are already coming out. But I want to just also thank the CS, congratulate him for being the first one in this very unique arrangement where we get answers firsthand instead of what we used to go about last parliament, 11th parliament, chairs who had no substantial answers. I have listened to the CS very carefully, and Mr. Speaker, this small matter of birth registration may look small, but the inconveniences it gets to people and to the public at large are huge. You want to take your child to grade 1 to register for NEMIS, you need a birth certificate. You want to get a passport, you will need a birth certificate. So, Mr. Speaker, I am actually perturbed to hear the CS say that he has written letters to the government printer, who is also anchored under the same ministry. I do not have the advantage of their nexus, so I will not speak to the letters. But my question is, follow-up question is, what are the timelines that we are looking at? And the reason I ask that, Mr. Speaker, is because shortages with birth registration, with death registration, shortages with IDs, printing materials are treated as normal. So my first question is, how does the civil registration services sit in the ministry in terms of budget allocation, in terms of autonomy, in terms of being able to run these services, Mr. Speaker? Number two,
supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is my question, and you did very badly with that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try to be very quick. The other one is the fact that the annexure between the Linda Mama parents, Mr. Speaker, and Linda Mama women. I am a practicing mother. I have given birth in the not so long past, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you, whether you give birth in a public...
I didn't know being a mother is a practice?
Yeah, it's practicing. It's still ongoing. It's still ongoing, Mr. Speaker. But I'm just confirming, because I have gone through it, I know whether you give birth in the public hospitals or the private hospitals, you must be issued with that short pink paper that is called a notification, Mr. Speaker. That notification, you can use it in 6 months. But hospitals, and scrupulous hospitals, Mr. Speaker, are detaining mothers so that they are there for longer, so that the bills accumulate to pay. But that pink paper, even for home deliveries, Mr. Speaker, is gotten from the B1. paper that I'm asking about. So that is their nexture with the Linda Mama. And finally, Mr. Speaker, last Parliament, I brought a motion here. It was overwhelmingly approved because many members, including Muhaya MP, the Northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, do not have civil registration centers. So we requested, and this House passed, that we establish in every sub-county a civil registration center. So I'll be very keen to know what is the progress on that motion, even as we implement, Mr. Speaker, or does it have to wait longer? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mayaka.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, my question to the CS, who is a fellow left-handed, so I'm sure he'll think quick on his feet, is in relation to single mothers. The issue that most single mothers experience when they're transitioning from birth notification to birth certificate is that they're not able to get birth certificates for their children because in most instances, they don't have IDs of the father. So my question to the CS is, what support can you give to the single mothers to ensure that they get birth certificates for their children because they need this to be able to process medical insurance for their children? Thank you.
Dr. Nyikal, if you can be as brief as that, it will be very helpful. I take 4 and close the chapter to the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I also appreciate the Minister for being the first to answer questions here. Mr. Minister, the question was, the Cabinet to explain why mothers in public hospitals, then especially Mama Linda, you therefore, okay, Linda Mama. Okay, why mothers in public hospitals, especially those,
out a personal secret.
Yes. Why those on Linda Mama program are delayed? The implication of the question, Mr. Speaker, is that actually in private hospitals, this is not a problem. And those mothers who are also paying directly is not a problem. This is not in line with the minister's answer, which is that there is a shortage of forms at the printing level. If the problem was at printing level, then obviously this should affect all mothers, whether private, whether Linda Mama. So that's what is the issue there. And also, the number of children that are born annually is a factor that is publicly known. It's about between 1.5, around 1.5 million. And the minister is saying he needs information on this number. So if that's not satisfactory, can we have clarification on those 2 points, Mr. Speaker?
Thank you. Dr. Bukose. If you ask just one question,
Mr.
Yes.
Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I want to thank the Cabinet Secretary and congratulate him for being the first. Mr. Speaker, CS, my question is about the Huduma number, Huduma cards, Huduma number. What happened to them? Because at one time, a lot of colossal sums of money were used to procure the Huduma number. Is it still there? What happened to it? Thank you.
Mary Emase.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for finally noticing us around this corner. Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize on the issue of decentralizing issuance of birth certificates. Mr. Speaker, it is a very serious issue. My mothers go to another sub-county to look for birth certificates. And sometimes they are told those forms are not there. They have to travel so many kilometers severally. So I just want to emphasize that there is need to have a center in every sub-county. And Mr. Speaker, speaking of security, because I do not have time to ask, I just want to add one. That sometimes we even use our assistant chiefs and chiefs actually to collect those birth certificates, take them to the center. And I want to just request the CS kindly, Across the country, we have administrative units where the chiefs or assistant chiefs have passed on or have retired. They have not been replaced. A number of administrative units, like even divisions like in Teso South, were created. They have not yet been operationalized. Kindly, can you do something about it? Because they play a critical role in security. They help us with the birth certificates. They help us in even acquiring IDs. If there is no assistant chief or a chief to do the vetting, then our people are not getting these very necessary services on time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity.
Now you have resorted to raising your hands like in a classroom. The member, I can't see that far. The honorable member from, is it Mandera? The one next in front of Emase. Sorry, honorable member, I can't see you clearly because of the lighting. Honorable Sane. 1 minute, Honorable Sane. I couldn't see you clearly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Your hand was up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can use my colleague's mic. I come from a county which is 56,000, over 56,000 square kilometers. I do appreciate the work of the PS. For the first time since independence, he has posted at least death and birth officers last week. But the rest of the sub-counties do not have officers. Forget about forms. So in as much as I appreciate Honorable Wangari's question, when is the Cabinet Secretary posting all the officers in all the sub-counties of Wajir, which is twice the size of Rwanda as a country? Thank you.
CNN, Nguna. One question.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, some members here are very lucky. I am talking of the new constituencies which were created in 2013. In my constituency, Mwingi West, there is no single registration center on this. What is the ministry doing to ensure that these constituencies, at least members don't have to go to other constituencies to access the same service? Thank you.
Minister, you may answer those, and just before you do that, allow me, in case we have held these students for too long, we acknowledge the presence of students from Mamangina Senior School in Kikuyu, Kiambu. They are in the public gallery, and in the speaker's gallery we have St. Albert the Great, Siakago Boys High School, Mbere North in Embu. You are welcome to the House of Parliament. Minister Hall, I give a member for Lamu East. And who is out of order, Madam Chelule, to run across the floor with your hand raised.
Asante Bwana Spika kunipatia nafasi. Nami ni muulize waziri, ana mipango gani kwa wakazi wanaoishi mbali na ambapo hawana maofisa wala hawana hizo ofisi. Mtu kama wa Kiunga inamgharimu shilingi 4,000 kutoka Ishakani mpaka Kiunga shilingi 300, Kiunga Tumkokoni ndio upande boat ni shilingi 700, boti ya Mirao kipanda from Mkokoni kufika Mokoe ambao kuna ofisi ni shilingi 3,000. Njia moja ni 4,000 kurudi 4,000, 8,000 kwenda kutafuta birth certificate. Sehemu kama hizo una mipango gani ambao hazina hizo ofisi? Paka tuje maeneo bunge mengine ndio tutafute hizo huduma. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Let's have the answers now. Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, one of the priorities for us as a ministry is institutional reforms within the security sector, immigration, citizen services, prisons, correctional services, As I began by saying earlier this afternoon, Honorable Speaker, we admit that the rate at which and the efficiency at which government services are being rendered is not satisfactory. And therefore, we have considered that institutional reform, organizational culture change is a priority for all the departments within our ministry. I therefore want to accept the critical sentiments that have been raised about our performance, and we are working very hard to make sure that we do better. And going forward, this administration will be more than happy to report progress made on each and every sector. We have instituted baseline surveys for each and every service that we are offering, so that every 3-6 months we can be able to track progress. Having said so, Honorable Speaker, the Leader of Majority did ask whether we are remaining with the printing of documents or we are going digital. Honorable Speaker, the policy of government is to digitize all the services that it offers. I can report, as we speak, 5,771 services are partially digitized, out of which 3,293 services across government have been digitized end to end, and the other 2,498 are not partial, they are not end to end. The total is 5,771. 2,498 partially, 3,293 completely. So that is the policy. Digitization, Honorable Speaker, will come with its challenges, but it's a decision this government has taken to proceed that way. However, Honorable Speaker, that does not take the words that I spoke earlier, that still, as we wait towards complete digitization, we must continue producing and giving services, because our mothers are still giving birth as we speak, as we wait for this process to be consummated completely. And therefore, we are intended to make sure we satisfy the demand. I want to assure members we'll make progress. The Honorable Member for Gilgil asked for timelines. On 27th of March this year, which is 3 weeks ago, we initiated a rapid response initiative at the CRS, and therefore we're expecting 90 days that issue of shortage to be addressed, even as we wait for digitization, as well as the issue of equipment modernization. Honorable Speaker, a question has been raised on remote and far-flung areas, the example given by the member for Lamu East. I'll be visiting Lamu East next week for 2 days, and I think the example the member has given is an urgent priority, and I think we should be able to open a registration center in Kiunga as a matter of priority, because the need as described here is quite unique comparing to other parts of the country. I want to commit to the member and to the House that we're going to open a registration center there. Honorable Speaker, also, even as we continue with the digitization, we will still need registration centers. At the moment, out of the 369 sub-counties, in implementation of the motion passed by this House earlier on, we have civil registration centers in 137 sub-counties, meaning we are less than half. But we are continuing to open new ones on a needs basis. My PS for Citizen Services, I sent him to open one in Kajiado 1 month ago, and I think he's opening another one in Kobo, I think in a month's time. And this will be resolved as we continue to make sure that every sub-county has a civil registry. Honorable Speaker, also, the issue raised by the member from Mwingi West, I think Mwingi West is also an area which requires special measures. and I think we'll put it in our priority. Subject to resources, we will ensure that an area that like Mwingi gets that center also opened. I want to commit to the House that at least the ones that have been identified on the floor of this House by members, in the next 2 months, there will be a civil registration center, including the one raised about Wajir. Honorable Speaker, on this question and earlier on, a question was raised about administrative units. About 80 sub-counties were gazetted just before last election, and they are not operational. We do not have the resources to operationalize all those sub-counties. So what we have decided is to stagger the operationalization of all the gazetted sub-counties in a 3-year period, starting June this year. And the criteria we will use is the nature of hardship and inconveniences to service delivery, as well as regional balance, so that the first criteria of the 20 to 25 sub-counties to be operationalized this financial year starting June will take care of regions, but also hardship, size, population, and all the other factors. We'll come up with a criteria which will be fair and which can be shared to members if they want to know what criteria we will use to identify those that will come first, and then second, and then the third financial year. Honorable Speaker, I can also report to the House that areas where assistant chiefs and chiefs have not been recruited, my PS for internal security has already approved the recruitment process, and therefore we expect all those positions to be filled in the next 90 days across the country. Honorable Speaker, then I think again a question was asked between technology and what we are doing in the old fashion. Going forward, before cabinet is a policy brief, is a cabinet brief which is under consideration on the UPI, the Universal Personal Identifier. And I think in the next 1 or 2 weeks it will be disposed of, so that we migrate, we converge 2 things. One, that every child in Kenya gets a universal personal identifier at birth, which becomes their number in school, their whatever number they require. And when they are 18, that number is the ID number. Then at the same time and in parallel, another universal personal identifier for adults who are getting IDs. So you have a universal personal identifier at birth, and for the existing, because that one, by the time the first adult will use the UPI, it will be 18 years from when we commence. But in the meantime, we are migrating, we are considering, subject to approval by cabinet, migrating the current ID we have into a 4th generation ID, which is the UPI for adults, which of course will take away the question of Huduma number, which was not solving the kind of problems that we intend to solve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, about single mothers who cannot produce the fathers of the children's IDs.
Honorable Speaker, it is no longer a requirement of the law for a registration of a child to include both parents. It is not a requirement. It is now possible to register one parent if you are a one-parent child. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable members, will move to question 105 of 2023. Member for Mandera South.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question 105 of 2023. Could the Cabinet Secretary, 1, state the measures being taken to establish civil registration centers in every sub-county in the country so as to ease access to civil registration services. 2, state the measures the ministry is putting in place to immediately set up a civil registration at Elwak and Kutulo sub-counties in Mandera South to serve the huge population in the region, considering that the closest civil registration center to Mandera South constituency is located nearly 220 kilometers away from Mandera town and also serves Mandera North, Mandera West, Banisa, and Lafe constituencies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, this is nearly similar to the question of Mother Wangari, so we shouldn't spend too much time on this. Answer the question, and I'll allow one bite by the member who asked and one more member. Go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, just as I have told the House on the issue of operationalization of the administrative units that are gazetted and not operational, we are finalizing a criteria which will help us implement the recommendations of this House in the motion which was cited by the Honorable Member for Gilgil to make sure that every sub-county has a civil registry. So what we've done is that we have taken the remainder of all, we have taken the list of all the sub-counties that do not have a civil registry, and we want to implement, because there are quite many, unlike the sub-counties, we want to implement that motion in the next 5 years, but based on a criteria. That criteria, just as in the first case with sub-counties, will be as follows. First of all, those that will get centers, because right now, Mr. Speaker, if I can explain this for half a minute, at the moment, we are opening these centers on the request of individual members of parliament. Like I cited the Kajiado North, it was a request by the MP. I cited Imenti South. The member for Imenti South, who can confirm, is the one who wrote and requested for a center. And we felt that perhaps we should have an objective criteria so that, again, we make sure that that implementation of the recommendation of this House is done fairly, equitably, and making sure that every part of the country is covered. So the criteria will involve, first of all, regional diversity, so that we pick in the first year, every region of our country will be represented in those that will be open this year, but also special and unique circumstances like topography, hardship, population, and so forth. Going forward, to avoid, complaints, public complaints, at a future date, now that this tradition of ministers appearing before the House has begun, I'll be more than happy later on, when the opportunity happens, to provide an update to the House where we are, the criteria we are using. By that time, we'll have adopted it, and then the rollout to ensure that no part of the country is favored and no part of the country will be left out. In fact, on the Wajir issue, generally northern Kenya, upper eastern, upper coast, pastoral areas generally, I think special attention will be given to those areas because I have been there and I know it is quite challenging when one has to travel, as was the case raised by the member for Lamu East. You use 10,000 shillings to go and look for a birth certificate. Another Kenyan is using matatu and paying 50 bob to and fro. But all these factors will be taken into consideration because we want an equitable country and a country where public policy is informed by objective criteria. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I thank the minister for the answer. Probably most of the answers that I would have wanted had been preempted in the previous question.
I feel the same.
Yeah. So, but I will say, first of all, we have dwelled so much on birth certificates, but a functioning civil registration center and service actually has three very important events. That is registration of births, registration of marriages, and also registration of deaths. And even if we go digital, Mr. Speaker, sir, even if we go digital, you know, registration alone is not enough because the Civil Registration Service has to provide the certificate as a proof of that registration. And that is why we are asking for physical facility and officers who would be in those centers. To put what I'm, particularly in my constituency, when I mentioned Elwak and I mentioned Kutulo, those are two sub-counties in one constituency, vastly, you know, spread apart. Mandera town where the civil registration center is, the only civil registration center we have in Mandera County, is 220 kilometers from Elwak. And I'm sure the cabinet secretary knows the problems that are there traveling between Elwak and Mandera, especially with the menace from those bad guys from across the border. That road has been a very risky road, especially when you are traveling between Elwak and Mandera, and also between Kutulo and Elwak. So you travel 220 kilometers, and the only bus...
Honorable member, you are now making a speech.
Okay, the only bus that you use for transport between two is the bus that comes from Nairobi. That's what you wait for, so that you can hike it to Mandera. So my plea to the cabinet secretary is that a sub-county like Elwak and Kutulo, which are some of the oldest in that region, surely require civil registration centers very urgently because of the importance of those certificates that the Honorable Mother Wangari had mentioned earlier. You know, the name is, if you want to travel with your child from Mandera now, you cannot take that child on the flight if they don't have a birth certificate. And this all is a challenge, and we require those documents in Mandera. I think the answers that have been given, the usual answers that we hear when government gives answers to, you know, lack of facilities, lack of officers, lack of funding. These are answers which...
Honorable Harrow, you are debating.
Okay, sir.
I gave you an opportunity to ask a supplementary if you feel your question was not sufficiently answered.
So what the Honorable Cabinet Secretary mentioned that some of the initiatives come from the MPs. And I have the benefit of having a copy of his written answer. And he had mentioned of partnership between the Member of Parliament and the national government offices on the ground. I would want to know what would that partnership look like? How does it manifest itself? Because we would really want to initiate those initiatives and see what that partnership can do to help our people on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Kindiki, one question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the PS for the confidence he has answered our questions, but I have a problem, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the issuance of passports. There are some questions that I think that form need to be reviewed, particularly on the fathers, mothers, and even the children, some of who could be deceased. I don't see the relevance for that. Two, there is so many migrants who have come to this country purporting to be experts in various fields. They have been given permit to work in Kenya. Even some of them have no technical expertise, taking jobs for Kenyans who are even very qualified. What is this that the ministry is doing to ensure that we don't have hawkers coming here purporting to be expert in various fields? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Julius Sunguli. 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to ask the minister to confirm whether the answer he gave about birth certificates also applies to forms for registration of persons. Because as far as Kilgoris is concerned, there has been no registration, fresh registrations of persons for nearly 6 months now, and the reason being that there are no forms. What is the minister going to do to ensure that those forms are available? And attached to that, Mr. Speaker, if the minister could confirm, could explain what he means by operationalizing new administrative areas when in fact it is members of parliament through CDF who build these facilities. All he does is to post people there. And could he remove Kilgoris from, Transmara West district from those districts that require vetting, because we do not border any international, we don't have an international border. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kilome.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity. Mine is just very brief, and this one goes direct to the CS. I had a serious meeting with the CS for the last, like around 60 days, and they promised me that this is Kilome constituency, CS. You promised me I will get a registrar in my constituency because I already have the office. So I would just want to make a follow-up on the same. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Last on this, Johanna Ngeno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also wish to congratulate the CS for the questions and answers he has made. Mr. Speaker, mine is just almost on the same issue of registration centers. Mr. Speaker, I would wish the CS to consider whether in those areas where there are no registration centers, to make mobile registration so that those people who cannot, or by the time the government puts money to build offices and send officers there, people should be able to access those particular registration centers. Speaker, and secondly,
one at a time.
Speaker, secondly, on the question of boundaries, areas that are bordering international countries, where we have serious vetting and actually denying people to get their IDs, can they also remove Mwadikir from that list of constituencies which are bordering either Tanzania or other countries? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Can we stop here on this question, members? Yes, Minister, answer those supplementaries.
Sorry, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on the last issue, which has been raised by a member for Murodikil and another member earlier on, the government takes the view and has decided that vetting is a discriminative process which exposes citizens from certain parts of the country to unduly difficult procedures. Of course, the reason why this policy has been there is for good reasons. It's for our national security. Where you have large threats, then you need to be a bit careful so that you minimize security threats through the registration of our citizens. However, we have come up with a modality of ensuring that all critical documents from passports, IDs, birth certificates, all critical documents must be supplied within 21 days, irrespective of where the applicants come from. Where possible, they can come out in 3 days, in 7 days, in 10 days, but no Kenyan should wait for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years to get an ID or a passport simply because they come from a certain part of the country. Therefore, within the next 3 months, the policy of vetting in all the citizen registration services will be abolished and replaced with a new way of ensuring that all registration documents are achieved by all Kenyans within a maximum of 21 days. Honorable Speaker, the issue of vetting, actually, I was in Moyale, and I came across Kenyan youths who had been waiting for IDs for 3 years and 2 months. About 10 young people from Moyale. They applied when they were 18, now they are 21, and they are still waiting. Why? Vetting. We are still, NIS and other institutions are still verifying certain things. This is unacceptable. We are going to abolish that. Honorable Speaker, the member for Kilome, it is true, I agree, Honorable Speaker, I committed to the member who came to my office that we will post a civil registration officer there, but I asked him to support, and that also ties with the question the member asked, what kind of support is this the CS is talking between the national government and CDF? Where the member through CDF is able to obtain consent to build the office, then we give staff and of course the resources that are tied to making sure the office is operational. And that is what we are calling operationalization for the member for Kilgoris. Because even if it's built by CDF, CDF is also public money, okay? But the unit is not operational because the Ministry of Interior must post an officer and give that officer money in the budget to run the office. You can build an office and it's not operational because, one, there is no staff, or you have staff who have no budget to run the office. Honorable Speaker, therefore, in response to the member for Emurua-Dikil, member for Kilgoris, and other members, vetting will not only be abolished in those constituencies, but across the country. And for the member for Kilome, now that the office is complete, I will post a civil registrar in Kilome on Monday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Joseph Gitari, you have 2 questions in a row. Minister, indulge him to ask both at the same time. They seem to be related to security issues. So ask question 106 and 107.
Together.
Together.
Thank you, Speaker. I wish to ask question 106 of 2023, where I'm asking the Cabinet Secretary.
Minister, note that there are 2 questions coming at the same time.
Number 1, clarify whether occurrence book numbers OB number 10-11-01-2022 at 18:05 hours and 07/9/05/2022 at 11:25 hours reported at Kagumo Police Station, and OB number 14/24/9/2022 and OB number 09/10/12/2021 reported at Kavonge Police Post in the name of one Laban Rukenya Munene related to the same person. Number 2, explain under what circumstances did the above mentioned person, with all the 4 entries in the occurrence book, has only been arrested once and failed to attend court for case number 3356/22, despite having a warrant of arrest in his name. Number 3, state the reason as to why the said person was released from Kagumo Police Station in September 2022, despite having serious pending cases against him. Mr. Speaker, I also want to ask question 107, 2023, whereby I'm asking the Cabinet Secretary to explain the measures the Ministry has instituted to address the emergence of criminal gangs and groups with terror rings or affiliated to terror groups in the country, including actions being taken against those that are facilitating with links or sponsoring such groups. Number 2, describe the strategies the ministry has put in place to deal with the emergence of criminal gangs in major towns of Nakuru, Nairobi, Mombasa, and other towns, in particular criminal gangs known as Wechame militia group that is terrorizing residents in Kagumo town in Kirinyaga Central. Number 3, explain the security measure that the minister has put in place to address rampant insecurity incidences in Kerugoya town, especially along Medingaere Road and Kemore area. I submit.
Minister, I think those are related questions from the same area, and we can be done in 20 minutes on this.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the question raised by the member for Kerugoya Central regarding the suspect Laban Rukenya Munene, I would like to respond as follows. That yes, the four entries to the OB at Kagumo Police Post and Kabonde Police Post relate to one person, namely Laban Rukenya Munene. This is a suspect of crime who is awaiting prosecution before the Baricho law courts and is accused of stealing on various dates. He stole from a victim called Mary Karua Nagashoki, twice actually. On a third occasion, the same Rukenya, the same Munene stole from a Mr. John Rukenya, and on another occasion he stole from a Miss Jemima Wangeshi. The suspect was arrested on 3rd of April 2022 and arraigned before the Baricho Law Court under criminal case number 356 of 2022. However, the suspect was released by court on bail. The suspect subsequently jumped bail and is on the run. And the government and the prosecution and security agencies have no control over who the court gives bail or not. So the prosecution tried to oppose the granting of bail, but the court ruled against the prosecution. The bail was granted, and when the suspect was admitted to bail, he jumped bail and is now on the run. The prosecution went back to court and obtained a warrant of arrest, and we are still looking for this suspect. The security agencies are yet to track him down, but I want to assure the member for Kirinyaga Central and the House that criminal investigations, criminal matters are never closed, and therefore we are actively looking for these suspects with a view to arresting them in line with the arrest warrants in our possession, and also to produce them in court for prosecution. Honorable Speaker, with regard to the next question from the same member, parliamentary question number 107 of 2023, I would like to respond as follows. That sometimes at the middle of last year, there was an increasing incidents. There were increasing incidents of urban crime. The most affected urban center was Nairobi. And by the time this administration was sworn into office, around mid-September, there was a huge crisis in this city arising out of terror gangs, gangs of youths, knife-wielding, some armed with pistols, other crude weapons, terrorizing people, robbing people day and night in many parts of the country. We have been able to contain that problem in Nairobi drastically by change of command, but also by change of strategy and deployment, by using special units within the National Police Service. And by and large, I think I am happy that crime has come down by nearly more than 60%, if not more, based on the statistics we are getting, and that matter is under control. But we are also aware there have been some criminal gangs terrorizing people in Nakuru, a gang called Confirm. We have been able to neutralize that threat because 3-4 months ago, it was a real menace. We've been able to arrest the ringleaders, and some of them have been arraigned in court. And right now, I think the situation is under control, and I can also report in the process we had to change again the command of Nakuru County to make sure that we inject fresh leadership and a new team, because sometimes when officers stay in one area for some time, they become a bit lethargic. And that's why we have a policy that no officer, no commander should stay in one station for more than 3 years, to allow them not only serve the whole country and the variety of the entire country, but also to ensure that they don't get involved in local communities and start being lethargic and not become the professionals they are supposed to be. The strategies, therefore, that we are applying to deal with this problem of organized gangs include intelligence-led investigations, which are working very well. But unfortunately, the downside, Honorable Speaker, is that intelligence-led investigations take a little time. But whenever we zero in on a suspect, we have enough evidence, enough intelligence, enough evidence that can be able to help us deal with the core of that issue. In fact, this is the approach we are using in the area issue of banditry. As we speak, we have on our radar very, very high-ranking suspects within the banditry networks. We believe we have enough information, and perhaps once we start striking on the network, the thing will come down. But you know, we needed to take a bit of time to be sure that we have the right information that can help us nip the problem in the bud. Other than that, we are investing heavily, Honorable Speaker, on special units, so that to allow police on general duties to concentrate on general maintenance of law of order. But where you have organized crime, organized gangs, banditry, terrorism, trafficking in drugs, and other sophisticated crimes, we are using formed units, including the Rapid Deployment Unit, including ASTU for livestock, the Anti-Stock Theft Unit, including SOG, the Special Operation Group, which has done a great job in neutralizing some of the most complicated security threats, especially in the counter-terrorism effort, and also including SWAT, which is the Special Weapons team that deal with urban close-range crime prevention and crime combating. And we have SWAT teams for men and women officers who do not operate in uniform, and they're really helping us a big deal in containing urban crime. And based on the information that the member has raised about Kagumo town, I am going to personally discuss with our police command in Kagumo so that we put in place a program to make sure that, as we have done in Nairobi, as we have done increasingly in Nakuru, we also exterminate that criminal gang before it takes over Kagumo town, because this country must be a country where citizens are free and they are not living under the terror of criminals. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, CS, for the elaborate answer for the two questions. Mr. Speaker, this question came a while back, and I want to confirm to the CS that after this issue came, when it was mentioned here in Parliament, the guy, Laban, has already been arrested, and Kangware people are happy. He has been arrested. He was arrested on Monday. That is Easter Monday. So the court will deal with that case. On the other issue, I want to commend the CS, Mr. Speaker, because I went to his office personally, and we discussed issues about Kagumo, and so far, the OCS who had overstayed has so far left the station, and even the OCS for another area in Kanyekine called Mutito, who has also left. On the other question, there were a number of series, as the CS is saying, there were serious criminals, especially in the Kagumo area. They were breaking into businesses, and this was immediately after the elections. But I want to confirm that this has so far gone down, and we are happy with the work we are doing, Bwana CS. I don't have any other question. I thank you.
Yes, those are just comments. Kikaria.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I want to thank Waziri for the information that he has given, and I want to confirm. It is true, the activities of the confirmed gang has been brought down by not even 60%, almost to 70%. Honorable Speaker, I can confirm we don't have even a single death in the last 1.5 months. But my question that I want to ask Waziri on this confirmed gang, Honorable Speaker, is that maybe, I don't know if he has a record of the number of deaths caused by these knife wielding gangs, because they carry a knife always, and they strike using the knife, including 2 of our very good rugby players who lost their lives around 3 months ago. So maybe if he has a number of the deaths which have been caused by this criminal gang. Secondly, phones are involved, because whenever they strike, they get your phone. And the people who are attacked normally report to the police station for police to be able to follow up on these phones. Then, and that would be a better way of following a phone that has been stolen, and you can be able to reach to the people who committed that crime. And maybe the reports which have been done, how many phones have been recovered in the process, so that they can be able to arrest the people. Either even if you bought a phone, then you must have bought it from somebody, then you give that information. Lastly,
Thank you. That's enough. Okay, give him the mic. One supplementary, Kikari.
Yes, the very last one. Honorable Speaker, is about police officers. The station where this, because the operations of Confirm is normally on the southern part where we have a police station called Bondeni. And that police station, Honorable Speaker, is notorious about the police officers who collude with these criminal gangs to be able, I've heard they just change the command, but they leave the actual policemen who have become, so what action other than the command at the station? Because the police officer who has come now, the OCS, is doing a tremendous work. So what happens to the officers under him, who are the main culprits who are involved in collusion with this gang? And the very last one is, if I have information,
No, I'll give the floor to Honorable Mawade. Honorable Kikari, you have had 3 bites.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I want to thank the CS for having appeared here today so that we can be able to exchange with him, or rather answer our questions. First of all, I want to ask the Bwana CS, Are you aware that on Thursday, March the 30th, a 17-year-old high school student by the name Master Ezekiel Macau of Double Vision Secondary School was shot at Pipeline Estate, a resident of Pipeline Estate. On the same day, also, a 16-year-old boy by the name Master Stephen Mwau Muthusi was hit with a tear gas canister on the head, admitted at Kenyatta National Hospital, and succumbed to the injuries and taken to the city mortuary, burial permit number 0416790 at the city mortuary. And what are we doing about the officers that shot these two young individuals? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Women Rep Isiolo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mine is a very specific question that concerns the commitments made by the Cabinet Secretary during his visit to Isiolo County on matters insecurity. First of all, I would like to thank him for making an effort to go to specific places where we've been having a challenge with insecurity along the border. That is Garissa, Wajir, and Samburu area, where it's becoming a security hotspot. We may be enjoying a relative peace at the moment because of the drought situation that has existed before, but now we are getting out of that with the blessings of the rain. Most expected scenario will be, there will be hate. We currently seeing could be deceiving. So my question, Cabinet Secretary, is to speak to the specific commitment you made in the area called Mlango, bordering Samburu County, an area called Yamicha, bordering Wajir County, and an area called Korbesa, bordering Garissa County, where we've had so many people killed and a lot of livestock taken. You promised you will put up a formed unit there. It could be a buffer zone where you ensure that such level of killings will not happen in the future. Where are we with that? Secondly, on the issue of KPR.
One at a time, I gave you an
KPR, Mr. Speaker, I'm finishing. On the issue of KPR, that could be very useful to our people. Where are we on that in the case of Isiolo? And for your criteria for operationalizing the sub-counties, the 80 sub-counties, could you also add the level of insecurity as one of the criteria to be considered to let counties be operationalized in that order? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Kamket.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the appearance of the CS today in Parliament should be the beginning of our return constitutionally to the old system where Cabinet Secretaries are members of Parliament. Because indeed, we have been speaking to each other as Parliament without the presence of executive.
Honourable Kamket, I've given you an opportunity to ask a supplementary question
I
or
am,
make a speech.
Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, you will indulge me because earlier on, some issues were raised about even my constituency. But I would like to ask the Cabinet Secretary, number one, could the Cabinet Secretary consider reviewing the curfew orders to exclude trading centers that are, in order not to lose the largely peaceful populations, the trading centers in my constituency? Number two, Mr. Speaker, given that so far there has been no policing value or even deterrence value of roadblocks, could the Cabinet Secretary consider reducing the roadblocks to make them as friendly as possible, so as not to marginalize further the marginalized constituency of Tiaty. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this floor to invite the Cabinet Secretary very politely to Tiaty. I have seen him looking at Tiaty from binoculars in some instances. I would like to invite him and take a visit, and perhaps he will come back with a better view of that marginalized constituency. There are, finally, sorry, Speaker, there are some gazetted administrative units, and there are others which we have proposed in order to bring government as close as the people as possible. And could he make a commitment on the floor on whether that is going to be done in the shortest time possible, including the Tiaty Central Sub-County? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Saidi Poster. Give the mic to member for Galole.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, Tana River leaders had a meeting with the CS about 2 months ago. And in that meeting, the CS promised to give NPR from Tana River guns. But we have not seen those guns up to now. I want the CS to tell us when we are getting those guns. Tana River borders Lamu, and you know Lamu is a very volatile area in terms of security issues. So when are we getting those guns for our NPR? Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Zamzam.
Asante sana Bwana Spika. Mimi nina swali kwa waziri. Kwanza nikupongeze kuja leo bungeni kutusikiza. Na swali langu linaenda hivi. Ikiwa sisi kina mama tunazalia watoto wetu hospitalini, kisha tunapewa ile notification, na kisha baada ya hapo kupata birth certificate ya mtoto inakuwa ni shida. Mimi nauliza kwa nini usitufanyie wepesi pale pale hospitali, iwe mtoto akizaliwa anamaliziwa pale pale anapata birth certificate hospitali. Na kisha nikiangalia upande wa Pwani tunapata shida sana kupata certificate, na sisi tumekuwa marginalized muda mrefu. Mimi nataka niulize kwa nini nakuwa Mpwani ama yule wa Northeastern anaambiwa lazima alete birth certificate ya babu, ya nyanya, ya nani, wakati ni Mkenya, pengine wale wazazi walikuwa ama babu walikuwa hana hiyo. Hiyo imetusumbua sana katika Pwani, na tunauliza kama waziri utasaidia vipi wakazi wa Pwani na kina mama kwenye birth certificate. Asante sana.
Mama Zamzam, hilo swali tulimalizana nalo zamani sana. Sasa tuko na swali la mageng ya uhalifu. Mupe, ilikuwa inakuasha?
Hilo swali limenuasha kwa sababu ndio utata ulioko ndani ya Pwani, kwa hiyo sikupata mwanya, nimepitilizia hapo. Asante Bwana Spika.
Asante mami. Yes, Honorable. Yes. Ni Professor. Okay. Yes, ask your question, Mheshimiwa.
Asante, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is on the same. Igembe Central, we were promised NPRs. The guns were promised. So far, we've not got any. And the area also is marginalized. Insecurity cases are very high. Drug trafficking from the centers around Kiotene, this issue has been discussed. We requested that that place be moved into a police station. Nothing has been done. Also, this area where there is a lot of insecurity, where we requested for the GSU camp. We have not received the results or the report. Could the minister please respond on that and advise the way forward? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Last question of the day, Edith Nyenze. Gikaria, what is out of order?
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. This comes out of what the immediate Speaker, Mheshimiwa, has just indicated. Honourable Speaker, it's about the implementation of Waziri coming here, the commitments which are done. I had intended to ask towards the end, but that is yours so that you can give us direction, Honourable Speaker, is that the Committee on Implementation is one that takes up these matters once a commitment has been done. And I don't know whether we have any members of the Committee on Implementation for them to be able to be picking up what the minister is committing to do, like what you have just said, that it was promised and it was never done. So that is a work of a committee.
Gikaria,
I'm only asking. I'm sorry.
Something untenable. That is why we have Hansard, and that's why we have these officers sitting in front of the Speaker. Yes. Edith Nyenze, what is out of order? The chair cannot be out of order. Take your seat. Take your seat, Honourable Member. Edith Nyenze.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me take this time to congratulate the CS for the good work he's doing, especially on answering the questions. My concern is on insecurity. Especially, the question is whether the police officers would actually arrest their own. And there was a case in my constituency in February whereby a businessman was attacked together with his family. They were attacked by 4 people who were in the police uniform and they were armed. And actually they were beaten and left for the dead. Then they were taken to the hospital. Then after that, 3 of them rightly could identify one of the thugs whom they said, or whom they identified as a police officer. And this case was reported to the right places. They were promised that the 4 thugs would be paraded so that they can identify the people, but this has not been done. It has actually been reported several times. I know there is I poor, but still no one is taking any action. So my question is, what should be done? And do really police officers are arrested by their own?
Minister, indulge me to give 2 more. Lillian Kogo and the honourable member who was solicited by...
I thank you so much, Honourable Speaker, and I appreciate the Honourable CS and his team for coming to the floor of the House. Mine concerns administrative units in Rangwe constituency. Papa?
Humble question. 1 minute. Who is the member standing and